We've been hearing about digital India or digital Bharat for a long time, and I think we've debated lots of facets of it, but one facet that seems to have got ignored completely is basically how is this going to affect politicians, how is it going to affect our political class, and that's really what this debate is about, or this discussion is about, not a debate so much as a discussion, because I know, Jay, when we began, you asked me if this was a session on net neutrality, and I said it wasn't. But, this is just an example. If you look at, you had about 1 million, suggestions or comments coming to the minister. So you've got a so the question is that as you get an empowered citizenry, what happens, how does the political class actually respond to that? Does it affect what they say? Does it affect how they behave? So, in the earlier days, what used to happen was that you met your MLA or your MP, not very frequently. But now your MLA or your MP is a hashtag away, literally, And I remember last week when there was this debate in Parliament on net neutrality, then, the moment Derek O'Brien tweeted and said that, we're going to start now, we suddenly had a whole lot of people tuning on to the television and tweeting as the MPs were talking. So you've got a very, very different kind of world today. This is one part of the digitally empowered country. The other is, what the Prime Minister has been talking about. That I have a friend, for example, who has just set up 2 services. One in Shimla, one in Tirupati, which is basically he's geo-mapped all the toilets there, the public toilets, and you have Karamcharis who will go there every 1 hour or 2 hours, and they'll give you details of how those toilets are. Do they have water? Do they have light? Do they not? And eventually there's an interface for citizens to say that, listen, you're completely wrong here. And we know of the Chhattisgarh model where some years ago the government started putting out SMSs on, when the rations were going. So there's a whole level of empowerment going on at a different level. So if I can just begin this discussion with, maybe a 3 to 4 minute opening statement by each of our participants on what exactly the digital empowerment means to you. Has it, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Just a short opening statement, and then we can go on to a slightly more, some specific questions. If I can begin with you, Meenakshi. The red button is what you got to press.
Thank you, Sunil. All I can say is when I was searching the data, I came across that India's leaping forward, and almost like an athlete who did a warm-up of 10 years, and about 10 million people got hooked on to internet and digital literacy. And thereafter, it crossed 100 million, and today it is 300 million within 18 months. So that is the number which we are dealing with, almost adding 500 per month, 500 million per month, which is a huge number. And when it comes to a person like me, I represent New Delhi, which is one of the most digitally literate constituency of the country. So obviously you have to keep up with the challenges, and you have to be answerable to a huge section. Everybody, almost 90% households will have a cell phone, will also have internet connectivity, so they obviously look for 3G and 4G and better services. And that was the campaign on which I worked on before elections. And the first railway station which got Wi-Fi was New Delhi railway station. The first markets to have free Wi-Fi, it started with Khan Market and Connaught Place. So I tried experimenting in small ways. But with the change of government in Delhi, the Delhi administration goes to someone else. And there's very little I, as a politician, though I represent New Delhi as Lok Sabha constituency, can do with the developmental process. And when somebody talks about free Wi-Fi and free net connectivity, obviously there are questions and there are markups hidden or otherwise, and that is where the net neutrality debate also needs to go forward. I came up with this bright dream that everybody can be connected because it's difficult to meet up every constituent of your constituency. So I came up with this app called Constituency Connect. and thought it'll be a great idea. Didn't know where the whole thing will lead up, because that was the first launch and that was a huge launch. I need to rework, because end of the day, the problems which people are facing, they don't realize whether it's MP's job, it's MLA's job, it's a corporator's job. They connect to you because they think they have voted for you, and this person is accessible to me. Now, it's impossible to explain that, look, Jal Board does not lie with me. And I cannot tell Delhi administration, though I do tell Delhi administration, but Delhi administration will respond to me. So it's not about whether politicians are ready for this digital connectivity or not. There is some amount of bureaucratic lethargy also which is set in, and that bureaucratic lethargy, unless compelled to change its ways, it's not one-way traffic. It's the constituents, it's the politician, and finally the job needs to be done by the bureaucracy. And I'll share one personal experience, and you'll say, you'll probably not like that. We as MPs, we get some MP-led fund, and we immediately sign it off that, okay, do this project, do that project. But how that project needs to be carried on, I had the idea that everybody in my constituency should get health services, and it should have a GPS system, and also where it is located, where it is traveling, what kind of diseases are there, what kind of recurrence of diseases, everything needs to be analyzed, monitored. They are simply not delivering. So delivery of services lies a whole lot with the bureaucratic setup. So it's not just the politician or the constituent, the bureaucracy needs to evolve simultaneously. And in that entire process, it has to be a coordinated effort. And certainly, when we put in that effort, the governance system can definitely improve. And it's not just about e-commerce. Most people are talking about e-commerce. I think, yes, the numbers are going to rise, people are going to make money, it's going to be accessible, all that is fine. But I look at it more from the point of view of government. The governance systems need to improve, and the best way of improving the governance system and taking to the most deprived, which has not happened for 60 years, is the Jan Dhan Yojana person who has a small bank account. That's where the subsidy needs to go. That's where the health card needs to be connected. That's where the facilities in terms of banking, small accounts, that's where we need to work at. And that's why the Digital Bharat is a great plan. The optical fiber network is under direct monitoring of the Prime Minister's office. And I'm sure we are likely to do well, and more governance will reach the places it is supposed to reach.
Okay, do you have a statement, so to speak?
Let me first answer your question as to what does a digitally empowered India mean to me. I'm going to rehash an old phrase and try to explain it in that context. So when the internet first got going, the phrase disintermediation was coined, and it meant businesses. So, you don't need travel agents anymore. You have removed the middleman. The consumer can directly go online and book. And you have hundreds of examples of disintermediation. And innovation is happening all the time. Today you have taxi services where you can hail directly, things like that. What is going to happen now, what is beginning to happen now, is disintermediation in politics and in governance. What does that mean? In politics, for instance, it means that you don't need to have a family network of 3 generations as a politician to have a ground presence. With increasing numbers of your constituents being online or being accessible through digital media, you can build your networks even as a first generation politician, even as somebody who doesn't have the traditional networks. What does it mean for governance? What it means for governance is that huge amount of every rupee that is spent by the government which leaks away doesn't reach the beneficiary. Sunshine is going to be shone on it now. Because the more things are digital, the more things that are accessible to the people, the more that you disintermediate, whether it is a bureaucracy or you disintermediate whoever is the system through which it trickles down, then it becomes more accessible. So common people are becoming much more aware of what the government is spending and what is not reaching them. So disintermediation in government services. For example, information as to how many schools have less than 10 students. in my constituency is going online. People are beginning to ask questions. How many teachers have been in a particular job, a particular posting for 16 years, although the job requires that they be transferred every 5 years? Why are they sticking on? And why are some teachers being transferred every 3 months? This information is coming up online. So disintermediation. Absolutely. Information is going out there. Now, second question is the topic. Topic today is, are the next gen politicians ready to embrace a digitally empowered India? I'll give you a blunt answer. Not really, but they are being dragged kicking and screaming. Let me give you an example. Every time you look at a voting in parliament, every single time, the Secretary General stands up and explains how the system is to be used. Every single time, even if you do it 5 times in a week, every time he stands up and explains how it is to be used. It seemed to me odd at first, except every single time you have several MPs that get it wrong. Every single time, from between a handful to a few dozens of MPs can't press the right button. So we have fundamental challenges in getting a digitally empowered India, and it's not just this. This is just to highlight how updated some of our policymakers are on some of these issues. You talked about net neutrality. When the net neutrality issue broke, only a few handful of us actually initially raised our voice. And then subsequently, a lot of people raised their voice, but because they recognized that it stood for some kind of a social justice, but didn't really understand the nuances. Yeah. Now, you don't necessarily need every MP to understand the nuances of something like net neutrality until it becomes a hot topic. That's all right. I don't hold that against anybody. But the whole idea of being resistant to using digital infrastructure to communicate with your people is bizarre. But even today, you have in 2015 many MPs coming online for the first time. And I can understand 5 years ago when MPs were resisting, saying Twitter is a fad or Facebook is a fad. But certainly, in the last 1 or 2 years, it should have become clear that it is not a fad, it is having an impact on elections. So let me conclude by giving 1 or 2 more examples. Rural India is catching up. Obviously, of the nearly 300 million people that are on the internet, I think the numbers are closer to 275. Of the nearly 300 million people that Meenakshi was referring to, most are urban. The rural internet subscription is probably about 50 million, is the information that we have. This is going to dramatically change in the coming years. And a lot of MPs still think that India is mostly rural, which technically is really not true anymore. And a lot of MPs still think that since my rural constituents don't have Twitter, it's not so relevant to me. And I'll tell you why that's not true. So starting 6 years ago, when I changed from Rajya Sabha to Lok Sabha, I've had a database of several lakh telephone numbers, mobile numbers. So I have them sliced down to profession, teachers for example, location, block or panchayat. And for the last 6 years, I've been communicating with my constituents and people around my state on SMS because they didn't have Twitter or social media. But what has happened in the last 1 year, just 1 year, there has been a dramatic surge of the use of WhatsApp in my rural constituency. So we have WhatsApp groups today, something called Kendrapada News, for instance, which has got thousands of participants. And they give out their own spiel, which totally dramatically changes the dialogue that we have been having so far in my constituency by way of these small rural newspapers and the TV channels, both regional and national. Now, WhatsApp is not a new thing for us in Delhi, because it's been around for 5-7 years and we've had groups on WhatsApp for a long time. But WhatsApp is very new in rural India. And as this 50 million goes to 100 million, goes to 200 million, goes to 300 million people that have access to broadband or access to any kind of internet access in rural India, Twitter, Facebook, and other new forms that will come up will have a dramatic impact on how we politicians engage with our constituents. Thanks.
Thanks. Manish, what Jay basically talked about was the idea ad several years ago, which basically has a politician coming and saying something, and then some guy has taken a video of it long ago, and he says, you said the same thing when you came when you came 5 years ago. So he said basically, no more ullu banayenge. So what Jay is really saying is that social media is not letting you ullu banayenge anymore. So I mean, is that the sort of experience that you have? Have you had the kind of experience that Jay is talking about in terms of how your constituency is reacting to you, how they are asking you questions? are the questions they're asking you a lot more different today than they were in the past?
Well, Sunil, first of all, let me thank you for having me here. I must say that we have, as Indians, have a very funny concept about Generation Next. I'm pushing 50, I'm about to retire, and I'm Generation Next.
You come,
so
from,
therefore,
you come from the background of the Youth Congress, so it's okay. Youth is a relative term.
so therefore, I really do not know what Generation Next really means, but be that as it may. Internet is one of those creations of humankind which humankind understands less and less as it mutates. And the one thing which the net has done over the past 15 years, and that's where it has a direct impact on political processes, is that it has decentralized power from the state, from the institutions to the individual. Never before in the history of humankind has so much power concurrently resided on so many fingertips around the world. So I think that's the big paradigm shift which the net has been able to bring. The difficulty with policymakers who deal with the net, and I'll come to the impact later, is that they try and impose the rules of Westphalian civilization to a virtual world. I think one thing which we are not able to comprehend is that inadvertently we've ended up creating a virtual civilization. That virtual civilization has its own rhythm, it has its own dynamics, and it has its own norms. And it is not going to be susceptible to the rules of human conduct as we know them or as we've institutionalized them. Now, how is it going to change the constituent representative or the people-politician relationship? Is that there is obviously a greater degree of interface. I'm not saying there's a greater degree of accountability, because a greater degree of accountability would only come if at some point in time the political system feels that the right of recall should be incorporated in the Representation of People's Act. But yes, it does bring about a greater degree of interface. People are not only able to weigh in on specific issues, specific problems, but more importantly, even instruct their representatives as to what their preferences are on a particular issue. So I guess in a manner, it is not only empowering for the people. In a manner, the whole paradigm shift of communications has been increasingly empowering for the representative, because if he is in touch, if he keeps his ear to the ground, he doesn't have to go around a constituency of 1.5 billion people. He can get a fair sense of where people stand on various issues. And yes, most importantly, what has happened is that the top-down discourse, the discourse of anchoritis, the discourse of editorialitis, that has been completely democratized. So therefore, you have the mainstream media, which is now held accountable by the new media or the grassroots media which has come up. And increasingly going forward, my own sense is that the mainstream media is only going to become an ISO 9002 standard or an ISI standard, whereby they would be putting the stamp of credibility on the very low grade of information which is proliferating all across. For example, if the guy who live tweeted the entire Osama bin Laden raid would have been in some manner graded, and his tweets would have been picked up by the mainstream media, and you could have actually had a kind of a live overview as the operation unfolded. I mean, the reason I give the Osama bin Laden example is because of what Harsh has written recently. So coming back to the constituency interface, I think any politician would really ignore it at his own peril. With 243.2 million people online in India, 3 billion across the world, numbers, over the next 1 decade